Sorry, there was a voice saying recording in process. So anyway, shalom, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to say a few words at the beginning of this important training session. As an alumnus of Erasmus student exchange myself, back in the last century, of course, it gives me special pleasure to underline the great appreciation that we have for all that you are doing. As you know, since 1987, when it was launched, Erasmus has given 10 million people a chance to study, train, volunteer, or gain professional experience abroad. And it has long been one of the pillars of the EU-Israel bilateral relationship. As you all know, this is about so much more than sending students to Europe and Israel, respectively. For instance, there is amazing cooperation on research. As we speak, my boss, the ambassador of the European Union to Israel, Dmitry Chanchev, is on his way to Bar-Ilan University to mark the fact that its Leslie and Susan Gonda Multidisciplinary Brain Research Center has been awarded last month 3.7 million euros, Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Grant for a groundbreaking brain and data science graduate program. And this is the first time that an Israeli university has won this prestigious grant, which is a source of great pride for all parties involved. So Mazel Tov on this amazing achievement. And there are different great projects that the National Erasmus Plus office in Israel is doing, such as the project on sharing European educational experience in public health for Israel, or the project on equity, accessibility to and democratization of higher education. Today, you will discuss inclusion and diversity in mobility in higher education, which is another crucially important topic. Last year, the European Commission adopted a framework to increase the inclusiveness and diversity of the Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps program for the period 2021-2027. And the measures not only allows many more people to learn or volunteer in another country, but it also makes sure that we reach out to increasing number of people with fewer opportunities. As our Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, Maria Gabriel, said at the time, EU programs need to benefit all, regardless of their background, socioeconomic context, and physical, mental, or health condition. Thus, making the new Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps more inclusive and diverse is key. Everyone needs to be able to benefit from the same opportunities and can also give back to society. This is the value of solidarity that the European project relies on. End of quote. In this spirit, I would like to commend you once more for your important work and wish you all a fruitful and engaging training session. Thank you. Toda.
Thank you so much, Toda, Andrea. And now I'm welcoming Christos Loitis. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Sorry for mispronouncing. Policy Officer of Erasmus Plus International Cooperation.
Thanks, Nama. Hello, everybody. Hello from Brussels. My name is Christos. I work in the Department of the European Commission dealing with education, youth, sport, and culture, and more specifically in the team following the international cooperation of our programs, and especially Erasmus Plus, which is a flagship program of our department. I'm also in the team that is following the international credit mobility, whose inclusion and diversity we will be discussing today. I don't want to take a lot of your time. Always in workshops, it's better to let the people actually work instead of listening to very long presentations. In any case, the Commission has a lot of opportunities to give long presentations to people. So I just want to continue from Andrea and saying that inclusion and diversity in the new Erasmus Plus program is one of the 4 horizontal priorities. So it doesn't concern only mobility, it doesn't concern only international cooperation. It goes through all the aspects of the program together with the digital transition, the green transition, and civic participation and democracy. to achieve this horizontal priority, we took a lot of measures already at the beginning of the new program, which started in 2021. To give you just a few examples that concern specifically the international credit mobility you'll be discussing today, we raised the organizational support that universities receive from 350 euros to 500 euros per participant in each project. That means that the European beneficiary institutions have more money to support cases of inclusion. We have made the top-up that the students receive on top of their normal grant in case of fewer opportunities mandatory for the universities. Therefore, there is no an opt-out option anymore, as it was the case in the previous program period. We have inserted in the program guide the option of a blended mobility, meaning that the physical component of the students' mobility can be shorter and can be complemented with the virtual period. And this, we hope that this will support greatly certain categories of students that found it very hard to leave their home country for a very long time, like students with children, maybe students with disabilities, students that need to support themselves financially and they work, so they cannot take a long leave. So all these categories, we hope they will be able to benefit from these measures and still be able to have this amazing experience. I'm an alumnus of Erasmus Plus myself, also a few years back. And we all hope that through a good cooperation between the European universities and universities in partner countries, we will be able to achieve all this. We have already included a very specific section about inclusion in the interinstitutional agreements that all your universities sign with the European counterparts. And we did that in order to highlight the importance of this section. And there it's very important for the two partners in Europe and in other countries to sit down and discuss very carefully what will be the specific target groups you would like to have, both in your outreach strategy, how to reach out to the students with fewer opportunities, but also to be able to use wisely the budget that is entrusted to the partnership. So we know that the money that we deliver for international cooperation is not endless. Many times there's much more demand than the available budget. Therefore, prioritizing certain target groups under the big category of inclusion is crucial. So these are a few hopefully positive messages from our side, from the headquarters here in Brussels. And we wish you all a great workshop today. I will be around Nama maybe for about an hour. So if I'm needed for any other clarifications, I'll be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Christos. And now, please welcome Mr. Ori Ziv, the Director of Accessibility for Populations and Preparatory Schools, to learn a bit about the Israeli policy as regarding to diversity and inclusion in Israeli institutions. Please.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I will share some slides. Let's see. Do you see it on a full screen?
Yes.
Okay, so Nama, if I'm saying a word in Hebrew, you can translate it to English, so it will flow better. Okay, so I will speak about accessibility to population, mainly about the Arab population, the ultra-Orthodox, which I will call in Hebrew Haredim, and the Ethiopians origin community. And this is, I will start with the numbers, with the number of students and their percentage among the students. So we can see that there was a big process in all the Israeli academy, which the population got from around 13% of the students in undergraduate to around 25. You can see mostly the increase of the Arab population from 10% to 18%, which means they are now around 40,000 students in the undergraduate. And the Haredim, which are 5%, and the Ethiopian origins are 1.5%. And these are also the main communities that we are focusing in. I can say that this is after the Israeli academies got two big revolutions. One is the establishment of the community colleges, the private and the public ones. And the other one is the establishment of the preparatory schools, mechinot, which are for all the populations. But afterwards, we were also making programs for Arabs, Haredim, and Ethiopian origins. Here we can see that the connection to the K-12 systems, the education systems, and we can see that in the age of 20 to 24, in the population, our populations are around 45% of the people. Among seniors, we can see that the Arabs have a problem of dropout in the years of schools, but a bigger thing is that the Haredim population are not doing Bagrut, they are not tested, and they are not eligible. And after we see that, we can see that the academic is showing the representation among the Bagruts that meets the requirement threshold of universities, both in the first year and in the undergraduate, in all the years in undergraduate. And we can see that there's first we saw that 10 years ago that wasn't the situation, and now we can see that we still have a gap in the graduate and the PhD. So before I will talk about our programs, I will speak about the barriers. So some of the barriers are common to all the population, also populations that not in our focus, like economic difficulties. When there are, we know that the economic situation of the student is very important for his success. We have populations that support their family and they have kids while they are students in the undergraduate, like the Haredim population. There are learning gaps. For Haredim, it's mostly math and English and Liba. And for Arabs, it's mainly the Hebrew language, which because they learn in a different school system, which they learn in Arabic, they have a gap in Hebrew. We know that the admission threshold, mostly in universities, but also in some colleges and some programs, the SAT, which called in Israel psychometry, is a big issue for them to get to the things that they want to learn. We see Arabs going to study abroad, mostly in Jordan, in the West Bank, and in East Europe. Mostly medicine and things that they cannot get into the university in Israel because of the admission threshold. social difficulties and cultural gaps, being a minority in Israel, if it's the Arab minority or the Haredi minority, and the university is the first time that they are going out of their bubble, their village or their neighborhood, and meet other people. I think in the context of internationality, it's also important. These things, and now we can get the cultural steps to make them be part of the community. Also the Israeli one in the university, but also in the international one. And we have also the barrier of information, of orientation to academy, which is also a barrier to most of the first generation in academy students. So the last slide will be about our programs. So I divided it to a pre-academic first degree and advanced degree, and also infrastructures for diversity and accessibility that we are operating in the universities and colleges. So in the pre-academic step, we have things in community, and in the academic institutions. In community, it's mostly programs that guide in high school for Arabs, in youth centers for Jewish non-Haredi periphery, and in employment centers for Haredim. The program's called Ru'ad for Arabs, Esagim for the periphery, and Zrakor for Haredim. And most of the things that these programs are doing is to help them decide which topic they want to learn, which university they can learn at, how they prepare themselves the best for studying. And the other program is in the academic institution, the preparatory courses or schools that they can learn. It's also can replace the Bagrut exams that they can get into the academic undergraduate. And there are also some more things like Step Before Everyone that they are coming for a month before everybody else in their first year to mostly the Arabs, to learn some Hebrew, to get some orientation to academy, and recognition of alternative acceptance mechanisms. In the first degree, we have economic support system. The first layer is basic for all the population of Israel which have socioeconomic difficulties. The other one is for our populations. So we have Irtika for Arabs, Marom for Ethiopian origins, and for origin, and Tene for Haredim. And that's something we're doing nationally, not through the universities and colleges. And the academic support is mostly through the institutions, which we fund budgets for tutoring and mentoring, for disability diagnosis, for emotional support, for orientation workshop for academy, both for the students and for the teachers, and also an excellent program in STEM studies. In advanced degree, we mostly have excellent scholarships from master degrees with thesis to PhD to postdoctoral, doctoral, and admission of academic staff. And we have some support system, both academic and economic. And the last one is the infrastructure, which we have an institutional commissioner for diversity, partnership, and inclusion, and institutional steering committee. I hope at least some of you know the people in your institution that lead in these programs. That's one of the offices, and the other one is the Dean of Students, which have a lot of doing with the academic support. And we're making learning sessions for academic and administrative staff. And maybe I will finish with saying that this meeting is the first of 3 meetings that we are doing. This is the first one. The second one is for the institutional officers for diversity, partnership, and inclusion. And we hope that we will have also a third one, which is a common meeting for you and the DPI commissioner in your institution to start and making programs. And I will finish with why do we think it's important, and to say that the Council for Higher Education is starting to think not in terms of only accessibility, but also in terms of inclusive excellency. And that means that we don't want just more people and to help them not to drop out through their studies, but to find their potential and to empower them. And that also means being part of the international academic community. And we know how important it is mostly for people that want academic career, but not only to be part, to see other places, to learn from other cultures, other people, to make partnership along the world. And I really want to thank all of the other coordinators that make this meeting possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Uri. It was very eye-opening, and I think important to know the structure in here in Israel regarding the programs that includes many other parts in the population of Israel that do need this special programs. And now we will start at the workshop of Wim Gabriels. Wim, I remember I turned to you like something like 3 or 4 months ago to be part of this training. And I was very excited of what you have to show and to offer and practice here today with us. So without further ado, let us begin.
Thank you very much, Nala, for allowing me to come and do this session for you. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Wim Gabriels. I'm the director of ESN International. I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can see my presentation as well. Is everything okay? Do you see my screen at the moment?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So just to give you a little bit of a brief overview of what we do, I'm not going to spend too much time explaining who we are, but we are the Erasmus Student Network. We're one of the key organizations working on student mobility. We're active in 41 countries, sadly, not really Israel yet, but we have been working more closely with people such as Nama and also in the William Project. Around 1,000 universities are connected to us through the local organizations. We have 15,000 volunteers and 20 staff members in the headquarters in Brussels. of which I am currently the director, and I work on the topic of inclusion and diversity within student mobility. Now, before we really start, I also want to make sure that I outline a little bit what we are going to do. So we're going to start and we will talk mostly about some of the results that we've seen from one of our projects on inclusion. And I want to outline that most of these results are more European based, but we have certain elements that are based on other on non-EU international credit mobility results, and that I've outlined specifically for you. But the goal for us is to think about what it would be then in your case. So to make it more interactive, I've also introduced a Slido exercise together with, after our little break, we will do a breakout group where we'll really get our hands on into what it would mean for our minority communities. And I would like to thank also Ori with his presentation before, outlining really where which minority groups Israel is working with. So that's also very good for us to know and understand. As I mentioned, we will be talking about the project called SEAM, and it means social inclusion and engagement in mobility. And we started off this project with the concept of student mobility leads to social mobility. So we believe that when we give young people more opportunities in life, to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, they will be able to increase their own personal situation through their education, and international education in this globalizing world is key for that. But before we do, I would like to get a little bit of a perspective from who we have here currently in the session, and what your interpretations are on when we talk about inclusion and integration. So I'm gonna, if you can join us on slido.com or use the hashtag SEAM_Israel, or you can use your phone and actually scan the QR code. Both of them would lead you to the same page. And then we can, I'll give you a second to see with the screen if it's working. Perfect. I will go to the next first question. So the first question is very simple. It's just to get the ball rolling and to see if everybody is managing to log in, is which institution are you from? So I know a little bit about who is in the room. The AU is Tel Aviv University, am I correct? Erasmus office. Holland Institute of Technology, College of Management, Techion, Council for Higher Education, Tel High, the Erasmus Plus office, Hebrew University, Academic of Rothschild Partnerships, Schenkar, Western Galilee College. So we have quite a large group of different institutions present. So that's very nice. Then the first question, or the next question would be, what does inclusion in student mobility mean to you? So what would inclusion, and then specifically in student mobility, what does it mean to you? So I see people answering equal opportunities in recruitment, offering all sectors an opportunity to take part. Opportunities, cooperation. At the key, which is very nice with this word cloud, in the end that we see that the majority of people really mention students. So making sure that everybody has the opportunity to take part in mobility, equality, cultural skills, students and opportunities at the core of this seems very nice as a conclusion. I see that everybody gave their input. We see that in the end, students and opportunities and giving people the opportunity to take part, empowering young people is at its core. The second question is, what does integration in the local community mean to you? So when they are in Israel or when they are abroad, when European students or international students are in Israel, or your Israeli students are in Europe or abroad, what would it mean to you for them to be integrated in local community? Respecting community, knowing the area, friends, togetherness, it's a very nice word. Intercultural, community, buddy system, it's very nice that this mentioned. Connections, connecting with local students. Again, equal opportunities, but then in terms of access to opportunities in the community. Very nice. Knowing the area. I still have two people that would like to contribute, so I'll give them a second. Okay, great. So we see here that togetherness, community, support, friends, buddies, which is a very technical or well, perhaps practical implementation of all of these words are connected. But that's language, social integration, and addressing needs, making sure that people feel welcome and a sense of belonging. That's one of my favorite concepts, actually, when we talk about integration, is belonging. So feeling that people belong in the community that they are a part of, however long they are staying during their international student mobility. I think that's a very nice way of looking at it. Now, it is very similar. So I want to showcase or do this exercise with you to understand what your perspectives are. And in the end, we want to indeed, with our project, widen participation so that everybody from different minority backgrounds has the opportunity to take part in the program and take part in mobility at large, making sure that everybody has equal access to opportunities, but also increase the interaction between international students and local communities in order to increase intercultural exchanges and visibility of mobility opportunities, so that later on more people can know about the program and in the end make mobility more inclusive. Now, we have a diverse partnership where we did this project with. It's a European network with different universities. The European University Foundation, which is a large network of universities across Europe, but also specific groups working on social elements, such as the S Forum, which is a group of national organizations working on access to opportunities for young people. In the end, we delivered a large report that focused on the student and staff perspectives on diversity and inclusion. And I always use this quote as one of the inspirations for the discussions, because one student said maybe it will be different abroad, was his aspiration, hoping that when they went on exchange, their current situation might not have that much impact on themselves. They were able to kind of wreck themselves free a little bit from their background and explore themselves and what it means to be themselves. So that's one of the key takeaways from me for this research. But we did a survey with 12,000 students answered. Around 1,000 answers came from from international credit mobility, not all Israeli, of course, but also from other types of international credit mobility strands. 65% of respondents were mobile students, and this will come back in a bit. In certain cases, I will talk about answers that were given by mobile students and answers that were given by non-mobile students, in order for us to understand, okay, what is it that mobile students experienced and what were maybe barriers for non-mobile students to participate, right? Because it's important for us to also understand why did students in certain cases not take part in mobility. We focused on 5 different minority groups, specifically first-generation students, so students that have no family member or parent or legal guardian that went and studied in higher education themselves. Second group was ethnic minority students, and we also had 30% respondents there. 21% of our respondents were students from low-income backgrounds, 19% were students from rural backgrounds, and 14% were students from an LGBTQI plus background. Just for you to know that this means that we had at least 1,000 answers, which make the samples quite viable to work with when it comes to the larger samples. The majority of our respondents came from the social sciences, humanities, economics, and engineering. Slightly less respondents came from natural sciences and medical sciences, but I think it's probably the same case for Israel as for the European international students, that it is slightly more difficult to go on exchange in medical sciences and sometimes natural sciences, unfortunately. A large percentage of our respondents came from did their mobility during their bachelor degree, and 27% was during their master degree. But I always also want to try and make a connection to the Israeli context. So I want to ask, what is the percentage that you currently know about of Israeli youth growing up under the poverty line, according to one of the latest reports that I could find? You can answer, and I think it will only show the results because there is a correct answer this time. We have 12 votes, 13. So according to an article that I read in the Israeli Times, 30% of young people were currently under the poverty line. Numbers for Orthodox Jews and Arab Israeli were higher than the general population. So those were some of the results that we were looking at. And do you perhaps know the number of outgoing Israeli students and staff through Erasmus Plus since 2015? Sure that Nama knows what the numbers, and she probably knows better what the current numbers are.
Yeah.
Because this is a
but
report.
I won't tell the answer.
Perfect. Because this was based on a report, I think with the latest updates, which probably closed 1 or 2 years ago. So hopefully the numbers are better, but we also had COVID in the middle. People are voting. Okay, and according to my knowledge, in the latest report from the data sheet from Erasmus Plus, 8,000 staff and students were outgoing Israeli students coming to Europe. Now, I also want to ask you, do you believe when students coming to Israel, are they well integrated in student life and society? What do you personally think at the moment? Do you think they're very well integrated? Do you think they're not well integrated? Or do you think, well, could be worse, could be better? Okay. Most seem to be agreeing. Some are more on the fence. But it's good to see that the majority think that at the end, students are pretty well integrated into local communities. So also to give maybe a little bit of a context of what internationalization and means to ESN and especially specifically perhaps with Israel in the context. So we have 28% of our members registered at ESN. So we have a membership database for international students. 28% of them are non-EU nationals. So 72 are EU nationals, 28% of them are non-EU nationals. Non-EU top 25 countries, there we see that in the top 25 of the countries, we see Turkey, Brazil, United States, and UK coming in. Israel, we don't have that many incoming international students where we work with in our local organizations. Around 600 have signed up to be part of ESN. We are active in 11 partner countries. So 11 countries that are not part of the Erasmus Plus program, but we don't have any local ESN organizations yet. And when it comes to Erasmus Plus in Israel, as I mentioned, 8,000 Israeli staff and students took part in mobilities in Europe. 6,000 were EU staff and students in Israel. And there were around 30% of youth at risk of poverty. I don't know, Nama, if you know more of the latest numbers, did this increase a bit more? And if you know, for example, if the division, because in Europe, or at least the general ICN numbers, I know that it's slightly higher on staff than it is on students. Mm-hmm. Do these numbers reflect the same in Israel?
Yes, so according to the numbers, the students are a bit higher than the staff exchanges right now, but also because of the COVID, so students had more ability to go abroad than staff.
Okay,
great. So I believe that it will also change, and yeah.
Happy to hear that, happy to hear, that's very nice. Yeah, so, and then we're going to start a little bit more on specific, the specific topics. So this is a. So how many students from disadvantaged backgrounds do you think are currently being reported within the Erasmus Plus program? So when students go on exchange, what is the current level of students with disadvantaged backgrounds going on exchange? I have 14 votes. So 50% said between 7 and 12, and that is indeed correct. Depending on which numbers you check, it is between 7 to 12% of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And also when you look at the European context, and it's actually quite similar to the Israeli context, we believe, or according to Eurostat, so our statistics bureau, 26% of Europeans are at risk of poverty and exclusion. So meaning that if we look at participation rates of 7 to 12 and people at risk of exclusion are at 26%, we see that there is a discrepancy between those two spaces. Does your institution include international mobility in its strategic plan? So do you have it integrated within your within your strategic plan? Thirteen votes. So 92% say yes, a few say no. Oh, it changed. So now everybody say indeed that they have it integrated in their strategic plan. Does your university reference students of disadvantaged background groups in your mobility strategy? First answer was a resounding yes. That's very nice. So around 91% say yes, which is very high, even definitely also compared to, for example, the European context, but I will talk about that more. And which groups do you consider to be students with fewer opportunities at your institution? So you can even scroll down so that you don't miss everybody, because there's more options there. And it should be multiple choice, meaning that you can select multiple answers. Yeah, so one person voted and they selected 5 answers, so it's working well. And we see that here so far, young people from lower income backgrounds, young people from ethnic minority groups, young people living with disabilities and health conditions. Religious communities, LGBTQI background. Ethnic minorities is bumping up, that's nice. Very interesting as well. I think the majority of the people voting have answered. So we'll go to the next slide. So here's a little bit of an overview of what our—
Excuse me, can we ask questions in between?
Yes.
Oh, sorry
Perfect.
to interrupt you. Can you go back to the other slide, to the previous slide?
This one?
Yeah, I wonder if you have any explanation. I find it extremely interesting that 100% of the votes were, not of the votes, but went to young people from ethnic minority groups as the most or the disadvantaged group with less opportunities than other groups. I really thought that maybe lower income will be higher than this, but do you have any explanation? Why is that?
I mean, I think it just really means that, and I think it's actually pretty positive, that there is a large sensitivity in Israel for the minority groups that you have in your country, right? And I think probably also the presentation given by the Council for Higher Education might have also influenced a little bit, okay, who do we consider as minority groups? And you see that there's been a lot of work on these different communities. So I think that might have definitely influenced also how people now consider in their higher education institutions who is considered students with fewer opportunities. And I think it's, in that sense, perhaps a very nice reflection of policy elements and support activities that have been organized at the national level. So that's very nice to see. And I even want to stress it specifically, because if you can see in the European context, only 47% of universities in our research indicated that minority ethnic groups were considered students with fewer opportunities. Now, and what you also mentioned, Josefa, what is interesting is that for us, students from low-income households were also mentioned as 71% as students with fewer opportunities. Followed very closely with students with living with disabilities, I think, which were also quite high in the figures. Now, of course, what is very often the case, and we'll talk about it when we come to financial support, but mechanisms of intersectionality are also very often coming together, meaning that students don't necessarily belong to one group. They might fit within characteristics that belong to several of these groups. 93% of university staff that we surveyed indicated that internationalization was part of their strategic plans, but only a third, which was different from the Israeli context, indicated that respondents include references to disadvantaged backgrounds in their strategy. So I think it's also good to see that this has changed, for example, compared to our research, that in the Israeli context, this is higher. Also in current polls that we've been doing with different universities, we see that the results are changing, that internationalization and inclusion has become a larger priority in different internationalization strategies for universities. We see that that's very good. The trend is moving in that direction. Now, when it comes to mobility offer, do you believe that the offer you do for students is currently diverse enough to cover all of their needs? So 50% say neutral, 31% say disagree. Some others say strongly agree. So maybe there are some best practices of people that would like to share them at one point, which is nice. And then when you develop your programs, do you engage with students or student representatives to plan them? Neutral. $83. Some say disagree. Neutral, not very much. Probably a bit, but not extremely a lot. 36% disagree. So it's more into the negative side than in the positive direction. which might also be interesting to reflect on. So when we look at the student impressions out of the mobile participants, we see that the majority of students take part in one semester exchanges, followed by 32% do a longer exchange. But then when we asked students what would they be interested in if they would be able to go on exchange, so the non-mobile students, we asked them, if you were to go abroad, what duration would this program be ideally? They said that the majority still preferred one semester. So we'll talk a lot, maybe a little bit about this later. There is a higher percentage of students interested in short-term mobilities, more than 4 weeks, less than one semester, or less than 4 weeks at 8%. But still, the majority of people would like to go for a longer period of time. So we can see that the duration is not necessarily maybe the issue. It is maybe more related to other factors that might impose or cause problems for students. And when we asked students what mobility type they took part in, we saw that 72% took part in student exchange, followed by other study exchanges. And then very low were numbers for other mobility programs or Erasmus Plus traineeships. But when we looked at non-mobile interest in mobility programs, we saw that Erasmus Studies and Erasmus traineeships scored very high. Short-term mobilities, however, and volunteering programs abroad also scored very high. So we see that more and more students are interested in different types of mechanisms to study abroad, but that Erasmus Plus in itself and these type of study exchanges have, of course, more top-of-mind awareness and a very structured way of being implemented, which makes it easier for students to access them in the end, which is a key takeaway. And then when we look at barriers, one of the key elements that people said was that, well, there is still a lot of paperwork that needs to be done. So students experience some negativity when it comes to all of the paperwork that is connected to it. But of course, I would like to check with you, what type of pre-departure support do you currently organize for your students, for them to be better aware of what needs to be done to participate in mobility? So the next question is, which type of pre-departure events do you organize? Are you able to vote, or you can scroll again down? There should be multiple answers available. So we see departure briefing for selected, group info sessions for promotion are key elements. So we see that 60% of respondents say that they do group information sessions for promotion. There's meetings with international officers available, departure briefing for selected participants, and the various events by student organization on international experiences, followed by social activities to engage with current international students at a lower of 30%, mobile alumni at 10%, and Skype sessions with international officers at also 10%. Then when we look at incoming students, to click again, Do you believe that incoming students engage well with the local community? %71%. Oh, it's jumping a bit. Majority of respondents agree. Okay, so the majority agree. So when we looked at the mobile participants reported practical barriers, we see that advancing initial costs and loss of income while studying abroad are considered the major barriers for students for practical barriers to go on mobility, followed by issues related to extension of degree potentially, and interruption with social ties, absence from family, academic entry requirements, language requirements, or duration of mobility is not necessarily considered that high of a threshold or a barrier. Majority of people answered neutrally or negatively that this would be a problem. So we see that the issues are more related to finances, perhaps impact on their degree, and interruption from family ties. Now, we looked at non-mobile students' reasons that blocked them from going on exchange. We saw that insufficient funding, lack of flexibility in degree programs, concerns about impact on academic achievement, and actual lack of knowledge of these opportunities are the core elements or issues that students experience. Not necessarily, and at the bottom you will see, there is not necessarily no interest to go abroad. There are other fears that compound them from taking part. We need to understand, okay, what are the reasons that students are not taking part? When we looked at specifically preparation support, we saw that 67% of the respondents took part in official briefings. So we also saw in the poll that we did that around 70% or 60% of you said that they do official briefings. So here, this is also the case for the students. 67% that said that they took part in briefing events, but that they would like more support on information specifically about the available funding and how that works. On 88% said that they would like more support with the application process, and 86% said that they would like more help choosing a host university. Now, 56% was not offered an activity with fellow students or mobility alumni to discuss these mobility opportunities, but 83% indicated they would like to discuss more with peers in a more social setting. So we see that quite a few students actually indicate, okay, I would like to know more from a peer-to-peer experience how previous alumni have taken part in mobility and how it impacted them. There were also one reflection related to health concerns in the times of COVID. So people are more concerned, or did raise more concerns throughout the project and throughout the research period when it came to health concerns within mobility opportunities. And I think this will also come back more and more when you now work with your outgoing students, that the topic of insurance and possibility of returning home and how and when will or might be a concern. And then when we looked at cost of living, I'm also going to start again with asking you a question. Do you currently believe the Erasmus Plus grants are high enough to cover your living costs? Agree. Neutral. So you have 75% of participants indicating that they agree that their Erasmus Plus grants are high enough. 22% say neutral, 11% say disagree. I have a follow-up question that is, does your institution have additional mobility funding available for students? So do you offer top-ups of any kind to students? Some say yes, majority say no. I think if you have comments to share, for example, on what type of additional mobility funding you have actually for your students, feel free also to let us know in the chat. We can have a look. It would be nice to hear what people are doing. If you feel comfortable, you can also speak up. It would be interesting to see what people are currently doing when they actually give additional top-ups.
Wim, I'd like to add. Hi.
Hello, Galia. Perfect.
Hi,
Go on.
Galia from Tel Aviv. I would say that we don't offer to begin with extra funds, but initially, once there's a group of students that we know that will be attending the Students Exchange Program around the world, we, as much as possible, try to get some kind of fund or one-time extra fund for them once they're already there. So it's a little bit in between. But again, it doesn't create more applicants or a drive to apply more, since we don't know of this up until the point that they leave.
Okay, well, very nice to hear an experience and to see that you're doing this to help students more while they're on exchange. Very nice. Is there anybody else who would like to share that added yes? Oh, okay, then we can go to the last question. And do you know by any chance, when do students receive their grants? So we see that within 1 month of arrival is considered the normal. 57% say that they receive them within 1 month. 29% say within 1 week of arrival, which is nice. 14% say before departure, and nobody has mentioned that it was later than 1 month after arrival, which is very good. And also, I think more specific for the international credit mobility students compared to the European context. So when we looked at this and we asked students to reflect on the cost of living per month at their host institution, we see that 30% say that they needed between 500 and 700 euros per month to survive. In general, 67% reported that they would need more than 500 euros to actually cover all of their living costs in any destination they had. 73% of staff reported a monthly living cost of over 501 euros. So this is corroborated also by international offices working on the topic. We wanted to make sure that people understood, okay, it's not only the students saying it is expensive, it is also universities that indicate the cost of living is higher than the grants that they're actually receiving. When it comes to financial support, we saw that actual grants, so here in purple, again, you see the students answering what their actual grants covered. And in gray, you will see the needed grant coverage by non-mobile respondents. So you see, okay, 59% of students indicated that their grant they received was less than 50% of the financial support. When we looked at the needed grant by non-mobile respondents, we saw that they would need more than 80% indicated they need more than 50% financial support to go on exchange. This is even more compounded for students from minority groups. So students with fewer opportunities indicate they need 75% of their mobility costs covered. And intersectionality is a big topic here, meaning that students from ethnic minority, from a low income background, in 77% of the cases said they would need a grant that covers between 75 and 100% of their costs, followed by ethnic minority respondents from rural backgrounds and ethnic minority respondents who were first generation background. So what it does imply is that students from different backgrounds need, and especially when they have intersectionality as experiences, they often need higher rates of financial support. And I think what's also important to note that ethnic minority, again, is actually also a common trend with the top 3 student groups responding they need this higher grant. What is maybe more specifically interesting in the ICM case is that students receive a higher grant and in general are more responding that satisfaction with the levels of grants that they receive, and also with the level of when they receive the grant. So 82% of our respondents indicated that they had issues with advancing initial costs, and especially in the European case where currently roughly 60% receives the grant after departure, it becomes difficult for students to cover all of their costs. I think, as you were mentioning in the poll earlier, students receive their grants earlier and have better financial support when it comes to ICM. So in general, for ICM, there is a higher satisfaction rate than actually in the overall Erasmus program currently. But there are still issues when it comes to taking part in mobility opportunities, having the combination of jobs and costs working as such. Now, one of the last set of questions is around experiences and personal background. So I want to ask, before we go on with the results, on if you might have experienced or seen or heard of discriminatory actions towards incoming or outgoing mobile students. So did you get reports from students that were incoming into Israel or students going out to Israel about discrimination they might have experienced? Okay. So 50% disagree, followed by 25% neutral, and some agree or some disagree, which is nice. Do students have equal access to student services and crisis support compared to the local student population? So this is a more neutral as a response, followed by strongly agree. So there are some saying that they have equal access to student services and crisis support, while others are more on the fence. When we looked at these, we saw that 76% in general had positive experiences, while abroad didn't report any negative experiences. 10% felt that they were treated differently or unfairly at their host university at some time, and felt that they did not have, and 50% felt that they did not have the equal access to resources compared to home students. Now, when we looked at the numbers, 34% felt treated unfairly or negatively at some point during their exchange. Very often, actually, this came then from students from the host university. So it's more peer-to-peer, where there are sometimes negative experiences. And here again, making sure that the different student groups actually interact to decrease this type of negative experiences might be important. And professors from host universities are working on making sure that students have equal access can also sometimes be a problem for students. So these are the two elements that actually could use some work in that field. When we looked at staff impressions, how do they report on support measures for international students? Majority agreed with what you were saying, that the majority of students have equal access to opportunities and resources. And I think this also replicates nicely your response, that when it comes to when issues need to be addressed, the results were a bit more neutral and on the fence. So 50% of the university respondents also indicated that when problems arise, there are proper mechanisms in place to address these issues. So this is only in the case of 50%. So we also suggest people to really look, and I think there are really some best practices to share from the Israeli context. I did a study visit at Hebrew University, and I remember also that the colleagues from Tel Hai University were working within the William Project on safety and security, and what happens in when students encounter certain problems. So there's a lot of work that has been done within the William Project that can actually be shown and shared as a best practice, not only for the Israeli context, but I think even later on, potentially also for the European context. We can learn from your experiences there. Unfortunately, fortunately, 76% did not experience any discrimination, but I think we can all agree that 24% is still too high a number. And very often discrimination is felt based on background, and then nationality and race/ethnicity comes back quite often, followed by gender, social status, or sexual orientation. And I saw that there was a group discussion slightly in the chat related to topics such as sexual orientation. I agree that we should not necessarily, and I want to also stipulate that in the research, we focus specifically on self-reporting. So people, when we asked the questions, they were self-reporting which sexual orientation, etc. they were on, and all of the information was used in an anonymous way as such, right? So it only worked with groups and in the group results. But I think it is also important to note that in that case, 10%, like students from an ethnic minority group are 10 times more likely to be discriminated against, and students from LGBTQI backgrounds 15 times more likely to feel discrimination during the exchange. So it is quite often the case that students from these groups experience more types of discrimination compared to their peers. So it is still important to make sure that when we have crisis situations or crisis plans, that we have measures in place, and that we know what it means to support students that experience homophobia or racism, and how to support these students during their exchange. But it's not all bad, right? I think we also need to focus on some of the good stuff. And here we see that there is quite a lot of positive impacts reported by students from by the student population. So there is an increase in interest of internationalization and global affairs, followed by an interest in further study or work abroad, And foreign language proficiency is also considered as a large benefit reported by students, but in many of the cases, or even commitment to degree program, grade or class degrees were reported above 60% as positive impact from their exchange. Also change in values or ethical position, and overseas academic or professional context were considered positive impacts of exchanges. So in that sense, students really reported positive experiences based on their degree. Now I want to finish before we go to the coffee break and the next part of the workshop after, on some key reflections for ICM. As I mentioned, overall, students from taking part in ICM mobility have a higher satisfaction rate for services of the host university, especially when it comes to accommodation and support from their IROs. These claims are, for example, not supported by non-EU program participants. So there is some reflections that this is specifically the case for ICM mobilities, including Israeli students. And general request for support follows the general trends. So higher issues related to access to program and funding opportunities are reported by students from ICM. Visas and integration and discrimination is more often the case for students from ICM backgrounds, and non-education competences sometimes conflict with internationalization of education. So this reflects again the issues with the visa. So students are having issues because sometimes ministries of foreign affairs put regulations in place that make it very difficult for students to go abroad, while we have internationalization of education priorities that might be part of real goals of education ministries. Those are sometimes in conflict and impede and slow down opportunities for students. There's a high level of intersectionality when another characteristic matches with the concept of ICM. So when ICM students take part in mobility, other barriers or other backgrounds are even making it more difficult for them to participate in mobility, which actually means that we need to watch out that the international dimension doesn't become too elite. So it doesn't really become something that only the more well-off student can take part in, because then otherwise we will not have as many students with fewer backgrounds taking part in international credit mobility. And when it comes to peer-to-peer support, is even more important for young people with fewer opportunities. We see that they need more representation and more people from their own personal backgrounds that have done it before, so they can see and see better what it means for young people that have these experiences before. So they need empowerment in representation of students and youth communities. It is key, and we will also talk a little bit more about that when we talk about communication. So all of this is summarized in the research report that you can find on our project website. It's a very lengthy document, but if you want to dive a little bit deeper, you can, and you can find it there. And now, Nama, I think we can take a 10-minute break, something like that, for everybody to get a little bit of a coffee.
Yes,
and then we'll go into a group exercise. Sorry.
Yeah, so we will be back here in 11:20 something, 11:23 in 10 minutes exactly.
Perfect. Thank you. See you in a bit.
Thank you. You can stay, of course, in here, and we will continue later. Hey everyone, so I think we'll now start the next part of the workshop, of it to be more interactive in the breakout rooms. Please, Wim.
Yes, thank you.
Show
Thank you very much,
the exercise.
Nama.
Mhm.
Yes, now we're gonna join a little bit more of an exercise together. So I want to start though by a little bit of an introduction to this exercise, so you know how it works and what we are intending to do. And the goal of the activity is to kind of first reflect on what are barriers to inclusion and barriers to participation of minority groups. And for that to work, I'm going to introduce you one specific concept that we've been working with within the project that has helped us quite a lot identify, okay, how do we work with different groups and what are different ways and challenges that students actually experience. And that is the social model to inclusion. And the social model to inclusion is basically identifying that inequality will always be part of society, and the goal is to kind of reverse our thinking. So very often we identify the challenges that students have as problems of the student rather than problems of society to actually welcome students in them. So the kind of a social model for inclusion turns the traditional model upside down. The traditional model is students have impairments or barriers, impairments, problems to take part. The social model kind of sees it differently and says, no, it is society that has barriers for students to take part in opportunities. And we are applying this to inclusion into international student mobility. So we're looking at, okay, what are barriers that then allow or ensure, no, actually prevent students from participating, sorry. And when we look at that, we see that there's 3 technical barrier types that we identify, 3 different ones. So we have institutional barriers, barriers that reflect programs that are being offered and the regulations that are being implemented by the institution. This can be your institution, your regulations around international student mobility. It can be the Erasmus Plus program and the rules and regulations that the program have, so the rules within the program. Environmental are the environmental factors in which the personal background of the student come into play. What is their societal background? Where do they live? Are they far away? Are they commuting? Are they living in a poor area of the city? What is their personal background, let's say? And this also then, for example, when it comes to access to comms and communication channels, might impact, for example, the way they reach information, how actively they engage within the international students' life, with student life in general, and how often or active they can be in non-curricular activities that are considered key for degree activities. Then when it looks to, the third one is attitudinal. So attitudinal barriers tackle the belief system of students and the emotions around the topic of mobility opportunities, for example. So very often they are, it's attitudinal barriers that might influence participation rates. So they might be internalized, so students can have this idea of like, well, this is not for the type of student that I am, right? So that this type of opportunities, I don't belong in this type of opportunities. And then very often these barriers are not imposed by someone else, but they can be internalized. So there might be some communication, some social support in order for the student to identify, okay, no, actually, I also belong here. I can take part in this type of activity. I think I have a slide with examples. Yes. So to give an example, to kind of extrapolate that you'll see here a list of different examples that can fit within each of these barriers. So the first one in the institutional, to make it clear, when we look at funding, it can be transversal, right? Funding and finances can be an issue that is transversal. On the one hand, students cannot have grants that are high enough. So in that sense, or they don't get their money on time, or they don't get a travel grant, for example, to do the flights, or to do the greener travel or slow travel to go to on their exchange, which very often is connected to how the funding is organized. And this is institutional. We consider this institutional. It's finance related, but it's institutional. And on the other hand, you have environmental, and this might be that they come from a low income background, or to go on exchange, they will have to stop their student job, meaning that they will have a loss of income throughout their mobility period. And this is an environmental background. This is what we consider an issue that will actually impact their participation. On the other hand, you have their beliefs around, maybe I am not a wealthy student, I have like a lot of work, a lot of other barriers to overcome. So this type of opportunity is not for me because I cannot afford it, right? And it might block them off from even looking for grant opportunities. So sometimes also this prevents students from checking, is there even available scholarships? Are there even available opportunities for me when it comes to financing the opportunity? So that's how, for example, one topic can be transversal, and how these different elements come into play. What is important is that, and we'll talk about it also maybe during the exercise itself, is to identify how you need to tackle each of these topics in order to make sure that students feel convinced to go on exchange. You need to cover kind of all of their concerns in each of these fields, their backgrounds, their institute, the regulations need to be covered, and their attitude towards, or the opportunity needs to be positive at the end of the day. So there is some work to be done in order to make all of these align so that students takes up the opportunity. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to identify these barriers in group. So now we're going to go, and I'm going to share with you a link to a mural, and we are going to look at 6 different students. And what I would like you to do is think about what these students have as potential barriers, and individually. So think about this. We have 6 profiles. So we have Raphael, who's a very young student, a language student from a rural background. His first of his family to go on into uni. He has many siblings though, and he has dyslexia. Mira is 27, a pharmacy student, a person of color from a middle-class background in a rural area. Julia is 20, a music student, is on the autism spectrum syndrome, has highly educated parents. We have Peter, who's 20, who studies in IT. He's from an island. I think that, well, in Israel, you don't have islands, so it's less relevant in this case, but he's from a very rural background also. He's part of the LGBTQI community, and he has sufficient financial resources to go on exchange. Flora is 22. She's an art student, urban low-income area, has a student job to make ends meet, and considers herself non-binary. And we have Max, 24, learning difficulties from an urban background, expat community, and a psychology student. So these are our 6 students. And now I'm going to share a link. Give me 1 second so that I can share the correct link to everybody. So in the chat, you will see a link to a mural that you should be able to join as a visitor. And I will show you what it looks like. We're can everybody see still my screen? I see multiple people entering the mural itself.
Yes, can see it.
So what I suggest is that while you enter, you still follow my screen for a little bit, and then after you switch to that screen so that you can actually operate it yourself. What you should be able to do, and if you want, you can try it out. You should be able to double click, and if you double click, you should see a post-it appear that you can actually fill with your idea. So you can see, for example, here in attitudinal, what are the problems? So if you double click, try it out. Is it working for you? That if you double click, you a post-it appears? Yes. Okay, great. You can type in it. Is it working? Yes. For me, it is. Everything okay for everybody? Technically? Okay. And we have here the instructions. So we see again the different profiles. And we're going to work only with the space of group 1 because we're going to do it all together in one big group. So what we can do is we can look at these 6 profiles. We can look at Rafael, Mira, Julia, Peter, Flora, and Max. And then you can think about what were the institutional, environmental, and attitudinal barriers that these students might have. So if you want, you can use a post-it and the next 5 minutes, write down potential barriers that you believe these students have. Or you can work on your own. So you'll see, for example, here, the instructions are also there. So did everybody make it into, I'm going to double check the chat. Everybody make it into the other space.
Yeah.
Take a moment. Is it working?
Yes, it works.
If you have questions, feel free to let me know. But you should be able to click and then, for example, write, okay, what do you think are potential barriers for these students? Move to the right corner. You can also change the color of the post-it if you want to remember which one you submitted. I think you can even, if you go to the left-hand side, you can add round or rectangular sticky notes as well.
What is an expat community on maps?
In his description. So he's a member of the expat community, meaning that he's actually already someone whose family at least moved into the country. So he's not a native from the country.
I see.
So,
Okay.
so he might not be a native Israeli, but might be a Native American living in Israel and then wanting to study abroad, for example.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Right, how is everybody doing? Do you still not need 2 more minutes to perhaps fill in a few more?
Maybe we'll go over the answers.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So, and we can even fill in if you something pops into mind, you can continue and even adding them later. So when we look at institutional, some people left general comments, some people made more comments that were related to a specific student or participant. I'm going to double check because I think I can actually ask you to follow me so that you can see everything. So when we look, for example, someone mentioned Max may have difficulties finding help with learning difficulties, which is indeed a potential for an issue. Mira might have inflexible program, maybe incompatible within European standards. Insufficient financial support is also mentioned as a potential issue. And Julia might have more issues to have access to opportunities. Another mention here is related to the European standards or the different types of opportunities. There might be lack of exchange agreements in a very specific study field between different universities, which makes it more difficult. Or student might be more career oriented with scholarships for internships might be more interesting than actually a student exchange. There might not be enough opportunities driven by Israeli institutions themselves. You might be technically very dependent on EU partners that define who can come versus you can decide who you would like to send, for example, which might then compound also who you have access to sending to. No support for dyslexia, for example, or some might have issues with strict regulations for a degree. So those are kind of the regulation elements that we were looking at and what is being offered in terms of support by the institution. And we looked at environmental background. So we have Raphael, who is a language student, and a language as a barrier might be an issue. Flora, who might experience financial difficulties during and after their exchange. This is linked to, for example, the other element of loss of income during exchange, impacts overall potential of spending. So it might impact how much money they have available to actually take part in mobility. Raphael might need extra help for studies during their exchange. Some people, because they have large families, might have care responsibilities. So they might have to actually be responsible for interacting or supporting the family with children, which then, if they go on exchange or study abroad, might impact family dynamics as well. And that might be a barrier. And Flora, for example, has low income background, so there might not be enough home support from this for her. There might be issues with parental disapproval, so students not being able to convince their parents that it would be a good idea for them to go on exchange. And there might be discrimination based on gender or orientation, or the distance and commuting into the courses for school might be an issue where, for example, they don't really take part in non-courses or in your info sessions because it's not part of their regular curricula, and they have to commute a very long time to get to university, so they don't stick around as much as perhaps students that are local or they're studying in dorms, so they don't take part in that many opportunities, let's say, which might be an issue. And when we look at attitudinal, we see that Mira could be considered a little bit older in Europe and might have trouble fitting in, and difficulties being away from home for a long period of time. People might feel that they might feel a bit homesick or something like that. Some people might feel the fear of being excluded, fear of being discriminated against, and that people fear they can't be part of the program because of peers and families' opinions. So you see a lot of different elements that we, as such, need to tackle. And then maybe we can do this kind of as a group, and we go through it. One topic at a time. So you can follow me on the screen. So we have now 7 different questions. What we'll do is I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes every time also to think about them, so that here the idea is that we identify opportunities or action plans to improve the communication and the support we give to students, right? So the idea here is that now we look at the 7 different steps. Who do we target? What would be our objective of our mobility promotion? So here our goal is we want to make mobility promotion to these students, and we want to make sure that students are engaged in these opportunities, right? From whatever background they come from. Now, we want to then be able to identify which are the target groups, which are our objectives, which support we have, which information we can access for them, and which activities they have, followed by stakeholders. Right, I'm going to check the chat because I see something happening. Okay. So now the idea is that we maybe you take 1 or 2 minutes yourself to identify in one of the elements where you would like to contribute with an idea, and then we will also quickly run through some of the experiences that you might have. So again, you can take a minute, look at what you would like to do, and then we will convene again and we will look at this together. Right. I think we can go start over them a little bit. So when we look at the minority groups, I think we can say indeed that we want to cover and support all of the minority groups that are part of the group, part of the exercise. Students from the minority groups or students with learning difficulties, ethnic, cultural, and economical, educational different backgrounds. The goal would be to have higher levels of participation and more diverse participation, and to increase applications and make the opportunities more available to them. What type of support can be foreseen is to have a more crisis support in problem cases, signaling the processes to students so they know that they will not be treated differently. So making sure that students feel they are supported in case of crises, continue to be in contact with students abroad to help them navigate in case of problems, help filling out forms and getting visas, etc. So more technical support, and signaling which adjustments can be made for students with learning barriers. So you can, for example, we have this project called inclusivemobility.eu, where universities can actually outline what type of reasonable adjustments they can make within their facilities. Can they give, for example, students with learning difficulties more time to do examination? Can they give the different formats of material so that the courses are also made available in audio or in braille for students that are blind or are hearing impaired? Things such as that can be found in those type of portals. When it comes to information, more information about the program and the opportunities and the way we can work to overcome these barriers, clear instructions and information. So also, for example, clear information about the grants and the financing and how this will work for them is mentioned also in some of our research as one of the key elements that we need to improve the information provision to students. And that followed by, for example, organizing alumni events with students from similar backgrounds, sharing experiences of as many diverse possible students, and do peer-to-peer activities, work with alumni from the program to promote it, showcase diversity. So all of these things are activities that can be done, and we need to make sure that when we do it, we diversify the channels that are being used in order to make sure that students are reached, because not all students follow the same Instagram page of the university or go to the same info session as we saw. Only 67% takes part in that. So we need to really identify which are the different ways students engage with content coming from the university, and making sure that that they are using, or that you reach all different student backgrounds, and working with internal and external stakeholders for this to reach that. So, so when we look at the barriers, and I'm going back to my slides, what we can kind of summarize as solutions or ways of working on them. When we look at institutional barriers, we need to identify which regulations need to change. When it comes to environmental backgrounds, we cannot change their environmental background. Maybe for your work long-term, you know, with the city, with the region where you work, you can change some of their environmental backgrounds. It was very good that we had the important information from the Council for Higher Education, right? They can maybe change over time the environmental background of the students. What we need to do as people, practitioners on the ground, is we need to provide them with extra support and different types of support measures, followed by communication that we do to students in order to make sure that they understand and that their perceptions about things change. We need to work on how we communicate to them. And when it comes to communication, so all of this can also be found in the guidelines for inclusive mobility promotion. And we have, I have a couple of slides related to representation. So, and with that, I'll round off, because I see that Tom is also in the call and is going to give more of a case study about Masaryk University. So when it comes to representation, inclusive communication is very important. I'm not going to go through the whole through the poll again, but as you see more and more, also representation and voices of young people from a diverse background in media is more common, and I think also in our communication and our work with international students, this is important so that people find themselves represented in the images and the work that you do. Now, why is this so important? And here we follow this idea of like, as a principle on inclusion, nothing about us without us, right? And the fact that representation gives this theory of the mirror and the window, it gives a mirror into someone else's experience that, it gives a window into someone else's experience that you might not be aware of. And for people that are part of a minority group, they actually see a mirror. So they see themselves mirrored back in opportunities, making sure that they understand that they can also take part in this type of activity, and that they are also part of what is being considered the norm, so that we extend what is currently normative in society, who are considered the standard student to take part in mobility opportunities. For that, there's two key elements that we need to work on. That is making sure that the messages are accessible and that they're used into different diverse channels, and that the student actually is able to identify themselves with the message so that they can see themselves represented. Do they feel that they are addressed by your message? Do they feel part of your communication? I think that's the most key question. And this is very often reflected based on the images and the languages that you use. So do you use images that are a representative of your student body, or do you use only very specific groups in your communication? Which languages do you use? Do you use neutral languages? Do you use gender neutral communication, or do you use gender specific communication? And or, for example, more complicated language, which might also increase the threshold. Now, to make it easier, we actually made within our project a new portal called the Erasmus Generation Portal, where, and I'm going to spend too much time on it, where people can actually find more peer-to-peer information and tips. So you'll find, for example, information coming from different cities and countries to understand what it's like to go on exchange there. So we'll have information about cost of living, inclusion, quality of life, so that they understand a little bit more, and specifically information related to the programs as such, with funding as a topic. But also, for example, testimonials from other students based on the departure location and the destination location. And then I think there was already an introduction to the new Erasmus program. I'll leave the slides in because they might be useful, but then I think I have used up quite a lot of my time already, that I can pass on the floor to Tom. You can find maybe, if we still have people that have access, you can let me know, how did you find the workshop? And if you have any final questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much, Wim. It was very insightful and interesting and interactive workshop. I really impressed from the different approaches and the way to tackle the situation, and some things that will stay with us now and in the future plans of mobility. And everything that relates to implementing the diversity and inclusive dimension of it. So please, if anyone have questions, you can write it in the chat. Wim, I guess you will stay with us until a bit longer, until the end. And
Can't
now,
wait to hear what Tom has to say.
okay, no problem. And now, please, I'm welcoming Mr. Tom Varga from Masaryk University. He's the mobility coordinator and study counselor for students with special needs. And he will present us the case study of inclusion in mobility in a practical point of view. Please, Tom.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. I will start sharing my screen with the presentation. I hope you see it. Is that right?
Yes, it works.
Thank you. Wonderful. Just very briefly to tell you where I come from. I'm coming from Masaryk University that has recently celebrated 100 years. So it's more 100 years old. Has about, thank you. Has about 10 faculties, more than 5,000 employees, and just under 30,000 students. It used to have more, but gradually it went down. Now it's expected to go up again due to the population demographics and so on. So fairly large university. When it comes, Wim already mentioned some of these concepts of impairment, disability, and so on. I think it's important to understand from the cultural point of view where the Czech Republic and Masaryk University stands here. So we understand impairment as part of the bodily, temporal, and permanent kind of changes. Can be visual impairment if there are impairment of the sight, but the blind is the whole spectrum, but the blind on the one hand, or partially sighted, or some minor impairment such as someone needing glasses. Then there is the disability, which is a functional result of the impairment, depending on the setting, on where the impairment is taking place, or where the student or person with impairment is situated. And then we have special needs, which we talk about more often, which is much broader concept, incorporating also the ethnic, racial, sexual specifics, and so on and so forth. So it's not only the medical, but also other culturally based things. And for these things, a single person with some type of impairment can have different disabilities in our point of view, depending on where the person is stationed or where the person is, depending on the barriers of the institutions. This is very important to take into account when it comes to inclusive mobility, because such person maybe has some barriers at our university or other institution, but it doesn't have to have any barriers abroad, let's say. So in terms of accessibility, there are two models then. This impacts the inclusive mobility as well. There is one influenced by the medical approach, that is where there is the notion that the student or the person with some impairment or special needs knows best, knows what's best for them. They just come and they tell you several things that are best for them, what the university should do for them, and the university doesn't really provide the services because it's not responsible for the service provision and adjustments or university design or basically anything of that sort. It's the students who gets the employees, gets the organizations that provide the services, and it's also the student that receives the funding, receives directly from the government or some other resources, gets all the funding, and is also the person who says what they need or what they want. Then there is the other model, which is more institutional and more social maybe, and that is the universities or higher education institutions, which is the case of the Czech Republic in general, provide the services, and they start with universal design for learning, which is the principles are to make the curriculum as accessible as possible. So a typical example might be to have electronic documents as the primary document, then the paper version of it as individualized adjustment. If someone wants to have a printed document, can have it, but officially the electronic version, which is accessible for anyone, and anyone can adjust the size of it, the colors and whatnot, they can do it, and that's universal. And then if this is not enough for more severe disabilities, then there are reasonable adjustments. And the university institution is the one providing the services, providing the adjustments themselves, and also guaranteeing the universal design. So this is where I come from. That's Teresia Center, Support Center for Students with Special Needs, that is responsible for the universal design and the individual adjustments. We have about almost 700 students registered in our center. We have almost 50 internal full-time employees and just about 90 external employees. So we are quite large center in terms of providing the services to students. As I mentioned, we are responsible for the universal design, and we provide practical services too. On the one side, the students or any person with impairment, and to teachers or anyone who comes into contact with these people, basically, with anyone. And we also provide methodical services for the whole Czech Republic, to the Ministry of Education and so on, and also to our project partners. We understand the special needs are also unrelated to the disability, like the medical. There are other aspects to consider. We don't really focus that much on these aspects. Needless to say, we are concentrating more on severe disabilities and also on mental issues, autism spectrum disorder, specific learning difficulties, and these impairments as such, not so much on the culturally based or religious based racial issues and these kind of things. Although currently we are quite active in terms of the refugee crisis on the war in the Ukraine, we do help municipality, and we provide the services as well, but also to the students themselves. So in terms of the structure, you can see that quite a lot of our students are with the severe disabilities, or it used to be higher, much higher before. The decreasing numbers are because more and more universities in the Czech Republic, especially after the year 2014, started offering the services for these students. So that's why the actual numbers are going down. We have fairly small number of specific learning disorders, the number of students, and this is culturally based, especially if you compare it to Anglo-Saxon world or other universities that have quite a big numbers of students with such disorders. And this is culturally based because the Czech Republic or this region doesn't teach the students with such disorders from the early stages to compensate using technology. So basically the only compensation is additional time, and that's about it. So we don't have that many students registered. So now finally, inclusive mobility. Masaryk University offers a huge number of possibilities for students to travel. Of course, the largest one is Erasmus Plus and Erasmus ICM as well, but there are quite a lot of other options. So students and employees can travel a lot if they want to, if they are willing. At Teresias, we have about 5 students per semester to travel abroad. This is with severe disabilities as well as not so severe disabilities such as mental disorders or specific learning difficulties. And we have about 5 to 10 students, incoming students to our university. For example, this semester, the autumn semester, there is about 8 students coming through Erasmus Plus, and plus about 5 students through other means such as ISEP or CEPUS. So we have quite a few of those coming in. And these are with some severe disabilities such as hearing impairment. So we have those as well. But we also have challenges, as were mentioned a bit. These are common across the whole pool of students who are unsure whether to go abroad or not to go abroad and how to deal with it. With students who have especially severe disabilities, these challenges or the fears are quite higher, and can be the fear of the unknown in terms of the services, what's going to happen abroad, how am I going to able to actually study. I'm kind of used to some sort of services in the Czech Republic at my home institution, but how is it going to look like abroad? Because not always the institutions abroad provide the information, full information on the service range, and they might be part of the A model, the approach of the student should come in and get himself, herself, or themselves the services, and the institution provides only partial services or only counseling, not the services themselves. And with this goes hand in hand the financial requirement. On the one hand, you get the Erasmus Plus funding, which should cover part of the costs, but I will show you that for more severe disabilities, this is not enough. Luckily, there is the special grant that can cover the costs for arranging the services, and I will talk about it a bit later, but it takes some time to apply, to fill in the application, to provide all the documents. And if you are not traveling through Erasmus Plus, but other means such as faculty agreements, ICEP, so on and so forth, there is no special funding for it. So we have to consider the financial aspect of it as well. And on the other side, there are the challenges of the institution. So at Masaryk University, there is the support center that provides the services for incoming students, but at other universities, they might not be such office or center. So there might be an office that provides partial services, counseling only to a certain degree. There is diversity office. There might be a disability office, but the disability office only provides services to wheelchair users, but not to students with visual impairment, accessibility of the documents, and so on and so forth. So in the end, there might be a huge list of people that the student needs to get in touch with to negotiate the agreement on services to be provided. So what it turns out, this is the visualization of what it might look like. The student trying to get in touch with exchange officers, student advisors, disability office, equal opportunity office, and other associations that provide services, adjustments or reasonable adjustments at the institution. So it might be quite a mess, and it can take quite a long time. And for a student who is supposed to study and look forward to study abroad at in a different country, might be quite down-putting, and might be even they might give up at some point because it might be too much for them to do it. This is where we also come in as a support center, that we provide support to students, and we take on us the burden of negotiating with various institutions, so the student can actually really look forward to what's coming. I mentioned the special funding from the Erasmus. This is very good opportunity for students to actually travel with severe disabilities, but also with some food intolerances as well. There is part of it as well. But the funding can provide or cover additional costs on accommodation, interpreting services for hearing impaired students, adaptation of study materials if they need to be adapted because of inaccessible version of it, such as printed materials, books, like real books can be read by some students or some people, but can cover the medical costs as well. If a student needs to or the person attending mobility needs to return to their home country because of medical issues, checkups at psychiatrists or meetings or psychotherapies, can be anything of that sort. So case studies, for example, we had an outgoing mobility of a deaf student who uses Czech sign language and can lip read, but only in Czech, not in English. And she was doing quite well. And there were some preparations needed. So the student had an intensive individual English course focused on the pronunciation, so she could learn how to lip read in English. This helped her a lot, but of course there are differences in pronunciation and the position of the tongue and lips, so it wasn't 100%, of course. That's why reasonable adjustments were required, individual consultations to get her more used to, so she could get more used to the pronunciation and the lip positions, but speech-to-text reporting and intensive course in British Sign Language because she went to the UK. So these services, first the speech-to-text reporting, then she learned quite quickly the British Sign Language, so she could manage to speak in it. And overall, these costs were about 10,000 euros for the whole semester that she went abroad. So as you can see, the costs are quite high and wouldn't be manageable without the extra funding of it. And the whole process of negotiating the services went through our center. So it was actually a colleague of mine, Lenka, who did this. And she talked to the receiving institution and managed to negotiate all the services there, and then help the student with the application form. If you were interested to listen to our interview with the student, you can then click on the link to YouTube with about 15 to 20 minutes discussions with the student about her experience. It is translated, she was speaking in international sign, and we had it translated by an interpreter from overseas company. And we have also example of an incoming student, hearing impaired student, wasn't deaf completely. He didn't use sign language, but he was familiar with it. But he communicated orally. He was quite experienced in lip reading in English. French was his native language, so he was all right with it. But he used speech-to-text reporting and language classes at them individually. Because of the listening classes and the whole lip reading procedure, he wouldn't benefit from a regular class, which is also important to know. Note within the universal design, if the student can stay in regular classes, then we let them stay there, or we promote the idea that they would stay there as part of the inclusion. But at some point, the universal design is not enough. So individualized forms are needed. And for this student, the calculation or the real costs were about half of what the previous student, so about 4,000 euros in the Czech Republic for that, for the speech-to-text reporting and the individual classes. Unfortunately, the student came in spring 2020, so during the rise of the pandemic, so many of the classes were online. Which also resulted in increase of the services, because during online classes and online Zoom meetings such as these, the lip reading is not always possible because the quality of the signal, quality of the transmission might not be well enough. But for some hearing impaired students, it was better because they could adjust the volume. So it depended on the impairment of the students. In the case of this student, he needed the speech-to-text reporting more often than in regular classes. So if you are interested in more information, you can click on this website. I'm going to share the link to this presentation in the chat, or I'm going to ask Naama to send it to you in a different version if you want to. And I'm also happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Tom. Actually, I have a question. You mentioned the COVID and the transition to online and virtual exchanges. Do you think it had like a solution for most of the problematic aspects of adjusting physical equipment and so on, or even the blended mobility option? Do you think that can answer and maybe low some of the expected costs of having the inclusion and diverse in mobility?
I think it definitely can, but it always depends on the impairment. So as I mentioned, the disability or the barriers of the environment depend on the impairment. So for instance, I know that our students benefited from the online classes if they're mobility impaired, so wheelchair users, for instance, because they didn't have to move from their home to the campus from one class to the other. They just stayed in their home at their home, so somewhere they felt comfortable. So and they just connected to the classes. So they definitely benefited from the whole procedure, and they would benefit from blended or online mobility for sure. Some hearing impaired students also benefited from it because they could adjust the volume if that's enough for them to just have speakerphones or earplugs, and they used a software to adjust the frequency of the voice. Then it's sure was a good version for them. But then we had hearing impaired students who required much more services than in regular setting. They required speech-to-text reporting during online classes, even though in a regular setup, they just sit it up front in the first 2 rows, and they were completely fine. They understood everything that the lecturer said or their classmates said, but in the online world, they couldn't understand. They just needed some support. And visually impaired students, this is the group that was influenced the most. They couldn't benefit from it at all because of the sharing of the screen is images. They oftentimes it's kind of small print. You can't zoom in. So these students required way more services than they used to before.
Thank you for your answer and for sharing the cases. I think it's very eye-opening and interesting to see how you tackle the situation. As you said, it can be cultural for some, and it can be something that, as you mentioned, the barriers of different languages. And it was very interesting to see the variety of cases and the creative solutions that you had to adjust and to give them in order for them to be part of the mobility and the activities. So thank you for that. If anyone else has any question, please write it in the chat and we will look into it later. And now I want to welcome Professor Mona Khoury-Kasbari, the Vice President of Strategy and Diversity, and Dr. Yosefa Tabib, the head of Tikva Israelit from Rothschild Partnerships. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And let me know when you want us to start and who starts.
Yes, let's start.
Naama, do you want Mona to start, or do you want?
Yeah, I prefer to start because I'm in the middle of conference and I have to go back to the conference. So I will speak about the issue of diversity and inclusion at the Hebrew University. And I believe, according to what Yosefa has already reported to me, that you have seen the data about increasing the numbers of Ahmad. It's so nice to see you here, even though I'm not happy for that, but it's nice to see you. Ahmad used to work with me until lately at the Hebrew University. He has a very important role in helping Arab students in general and students from East Jerusalem in particular. And now he is here with you. So One of the main things that, if you have seen the data that has happened during the last few years, is the increase in the numbers of students, in Arab students at the Hebrew University, actually in general Arab students in most Israeli institutions. And at the Hebrew University, we were able to increase the numbers from almost 10% 10 years ago to 17% this year, which is a dramatic change. And another important part, I'm not sure how much you are familiar with the Israeli situation, that we were able also to increase the numbers of students from East Jerusalem. And this is special because students from East Jerusalem, most of them are residents of Israel, they are not citizens, and they study according to the Palestinian curricula. So they don't study, they don't have matriculation tests, they have another tests. And in the past, they were not able to register to the Hebrew University with these degrees, okay? And we were the first actually to confirm these tawjihi degrees of these students to be able to register to the Hebrew University, but we always recommend these students to have a pre-academic year, preparatory year. And we started preparatory year for students from East Jerusalem 7 years ago with 80 students. And now we have like around 450 students from East Jerusalem, and we can have much more. You put me in pin, so I'm big. I prefer to see the other people and not myself. Can you remove it? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So this year we have 450, and if we have room for more students, we will be able to have almost like 700 students from East Jerusalem. And the good thing that half of them almost registered to the Hebrew University. And the other 50%, they go like maybe 30% of them go to other Israeli institutions, mainly in Jerusalem. So we know that we are helping not only the Hebrew University by increasing the numbers of students in our institution, but also having other institutions getting better students because of this preparation that they get. And we also work, when we talk about accessibility, we also try to increase the numbers of students from ultra-Orthodox society. And last year we had 600 students. 5 years ago, we have maybe 10 to 20 students from the ultra-Orthodox society. So we were able to increase dramatically the numbers, but they are very, very small. Like 600 compared to 10, it's a huge increase, but still it's a small number compared to the size of the population. And we also work with Ethiopian students, with students that they are first generation to education, which also another group that we noticed that in the past, many of the programs that maybe you have heard about them from OE were invested in Arab students, Ethiopian students, ultra-Orthodox students, but we didn't have a specific program for students who are first generation to education. And when we did the statistics, we noticed actually that almost 1 of 4 students at the Hebrew University is first generation to education. And almost 10% of them, they don't belong to the 3 groups that I mentioned. They are not Arabs, they are not Ethiopian Jews, they are not ultra-Orthodox. It means that we have 10% of students that they don't receive almost any support. We have support, but they don't have a specific program, comprehensive program for them like the other groups. So we started working with this group, and we have now a leadership program for them and scholarships for students who are first generation to education. So this is shortly about the accessibility part. And the other thing is inclusion, because what we noticed also that during the last decade, I think all the universities, we were busy increasing access. We were busy bringing more students from these groups. But we now noticed, and we know that like during the years, but we were very, our efforts were more directed toward the numbers than inclusion. And we noted that if we want these students to continue to come to our institutions and also to feel that they belong to this institution, we have to work more on the issue of inclusion. So we started also, first thing is the feasibility. So we started translating all the signs at the Hebrew University into 3 languages. Now, most of the signs at the Hebrew University are in 3 languages. Most of our letters, important letters by the rector, the president, of course, by my unit, are sent in 3 languages. Units are also using Arabic to send important messages to students, and the unit of diversity has a translator that helps units to translate in order to be able to send, letters to their students, and don't tell us that I don't have anyone who can translate, or use the Arab faculty members to translate. This is something that I said, okay, we are faculty members, we are not working in translation company. So this is another thing that we try to do. And the other thing that we have just gotten a very nice donation from the Schusterman Foundation that enabled us to work in many levels of inclusion. And I will tell you one of the projects that we are working on. It's working in the classes, which is based on the studies in the field, shows that if you want to change attitudes, working in classes is one of the best practices to change attitudes of students. And we use our classes, and we had last year we had started with a pilot of 14 faculty members, and this year we have 35 faculty members more who will participate in this project. That these professors will have now, they participated last week in a workshop that we will give them the tools and skills how to make students work in mixed groups in their assignments. So we have a variation between the courses, between the faculty members, and the course is a regular course. It's not a course on diversity. This is like the main thing, that it's a course in chemistry, it's a course in math, it's a course in physics, in computer science. It's a regular course that we help the faculty members make students work in mixed groups nationally, or, it doesn't need, in some classes we have faculty members who say, but I don't have enough Arab students. We said, no, it's not only for Arab and Jewish students. If like we have usually ultra-Orthodox students, like in computer science, we have a special program for ultra-Orthodox students. And usually when you look with whom they make their assignments, they make them with other ultra-Orthodox students. So you can mix students from different backgrounds, and it doesn't need to be only Jewish and Arab students. And also we know that we can mix between Arab students. I spoke earlier about students from East Jerusalem and Arab students who are not from East Jerusalem. And we know that also among this group, we have also some differences, and in some ways it's some stress or tension in sometimes. So this is another project that we do. And I will say one more thing, and then I will give you, if you want to ask me something, another very nice and some project that I started when I was appointed as a vice president. It's called Ambassadors for Diversity. It's a 24 group of students that they were selected based on that they belong to one of the underrepresented groups in the Israeli academia. So we have their Arab students from East Jerusalem, not from East Jerusalem, from the 3 religions, and we have Jewish students, secular Jewish students, ultra-Orthodox, Ethiopian students from the former Soviet Union, students with disability, and of course, I said ultra-Orthodox, female and male ultra-Orthodox. And we have one student who represents the majority. She doesn't belong to any of these groups. So we said, okay, she was very good in the interview that we said, okay, we'll accept her and she will represent the majority. And this group actually works on increasing also the knowledge of representing the Hebrew University among their communities, and also working as a group among themselves. So we bring them, we have they go into workshops that they get tools and skills how to work as a group, and they are exposed to different narratives that each one of them has, and also they work separately between them in their communities. So the main and also one of the main things that if you were visiting the Hebrew University, usually we bring some of them to speak with you. And after all the meetings, usually people remember only the ambassadors. They don't remember anything that I say. They like the ambassadors. So also we use them for speaking with many of the people who come visit the Hebrew University in order to represent, the complicity that we have among our students. So this is in general where we do much more, many more things, but I will give Yosefa to continue from here. Unless you want to ask me, Yosefa, I prefer to have questions and leave. If anyone wants to ask me.
That's fine by me. I'm not the host of the discussion.
Thank you, Mona. If anyone have question, please write them in the chat, or if you want to ask one now. I just want to be very complimentary for the time that we have. It was very inspirational, Mona. I think we can learn a lot from the case of the Hebrew University as a place that also have a diverse population here and in overall in Israel. And please, if you can, maybe share with us the information about the programs you mentioned. It is also something we would be happy to share and move on here in our community. And please, Yosefa, you can.
Mona, thank you. Feel free to.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm leaving. All the other vice presidents are also here. I will say hi from you. The females. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naama, and I've been here since the beginning of the workshop, so thank you for inviting me. I find it extremely important and very, very interesting, and so I appreciate it. And I hope you will send the presentations as well. I saw some data there that could be very helpful for our program and for the DI officers. Just briefly to introduce myself, my name is Yosefa Tabib, and I'm the head of the program known as Israeli Hope in Academia, Tikva Israelit, or what I call it, the program for the advancement of diversity, equity, and inclusion in academia. I find it more professional and meeting international standards by name, but I can say, previously you asked where are we coming from, the affiliation of the institutions, but I also a faculty member at the David Yellin Academic College of Education, and my main areas of research are ethnicity, gender, and class, and the way those identities shape the life trajectories of young adults in Israel. So this is why I was very curious about the question about ethnicity. And I also teach at the Hebrew University for many years. I teach the sociology of education. And I come from the civil society as well, from feminist organization. And from last November, I joined as the head of the program Tikva Israelit, or the DEI program. So I think that I hold like few perspectives, and what I do briefly is just to share some key points about the program, a little bit of historic background, just to make you more familiar with the program. So the program was established in 2016. By the Office of the President of Israel, in partnership with the Council for Higher Education, Planning and Budgeting Committee, the Edmond de Rothschild Foundation Israel, and other foundations. And I think the main goal was integrating processes of diversity and inclusion into academic institutions, while you can say fostering a diverse and culturally competent higher education system in Israel. It currently operates in 30 different academic institutions, colleges, and universities, and has several, just let me for a second, just turn off my cell phone, has several objectives, including incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion as a core value and an integral part of the academic institution's activities, assisting the professional DI appointees to execute a work plan. This is something very important. And increasing impact through collaborations across participating institutions, academic institutions, and obviously international institutions. And I consider this workshop to fall under this category of international collaboration. So I'm really happy about that. I just want to say that upon stepping in as the head of the program, I initiated a 2-month research study. I wanted to learn the field more thoroughly, its actors, challenges, opportunities, potential partners, and to clarify for me and for my strategic partner, the new strategic goals and objectives. And the study included meetings and interviews with nearly 70 stakeholders, including members of the steering committee of the program, DI officers in various academic institutions, organizations that are dedicated to diversity and inclusion in Israel, and obviously also researchers who are affiliated with the program or with the field. Obviously, I cannot, in the 10 minutes that I have, maybe 5 minutes now, share the entire, the findings and the obstacles, the challenges and recommendations. I do want to share some data with you and to tell you that we have today in the program 30 diversity officers or 30 DI officers in 30 academic institutions. 9 of them are in universities and the rest in colleges. Obviously, we're talking about public and budgeted colleges by the CHE and the PBC. We have, as you met, Mona, 4 vice presidents for diversity and inclusion in 4 universities, in Hebrew University, obviously, Tel Aviv University, Ben-Gurion University, and Technion. And I have to say that this all relatively new positions. These appointments have unique significance, demonstrating the importance attributed by the country's major universities or major academic institutions to the issue of DI in higher education. I have to say that some of the institutions established departments or units or even a center for diversity and inclusion. And out of the 30 officers, we have 27 female officers, which is not by mistake. There is a reason why we have a lot of women, most of them coming from the dean office, and we know that we have more women working in the area of welfare to the students. And we have 3 men. Obviously, we're about, hopefully we will have more diversity in gender in that sense. I want to say that we have only 2 officers that are from the Arab community, and we have none from the Haredi or the ultra-Orthodox community or the Ethiopian. There is a reason for that as well, since the academic faculty or the administrative staff are not diversified enough in Israel yet. So since they are coming from these kind of groups, hopefully we will be able to diversify this as well in ethnicity, gender, class, and other social categories and criteria. I want to say that the discussion about diversity and inclusion has a long history in Israeli society, and particularly in its academia. But the way we see it translating into a clear and active and strategic agenda, we see it only in recent years. So in this sense, the establishment of Tikva Israelit or Israeli Hope or the DI program has many worthwhile and important components. For the first time, it led to the creation of infrastructures in many academic institutions, colleges and universities, as well as the crafting of language and awareness and the creation of a new institutional position. We didn't have it before. A Tikva Israelit officer or DI officer evolved now into DI officer. So over the program's first 5 years, we've seen widespread activities of the officers in various institutions, faculty trainings, and other activities, and the creation of learning strategies and practices for practical applications aimed at advancing diversity and inclusion in academia. We don't work directly with students. We work through the DI officers, okay, which now their main mission is to offer workshops to academic and administrative staff. So sometimes people ask me about, so do you see any change in the students? But since the tools are aiming at a different population, so I'm not going to talk about the students. This is why Mona, for example, it was very important what she said about different projects to promote diversity and inclusion among the different societal groups within the Hebrew University or other academic institutions. I do want to say that we have a few recommendations that we offered our strategic partners, that we offered the academic institutions and the entire program. I just want to mention 2 out of the many recommendations that we have. And we thought about how do we create a transition from external motivation, funding for the DI officer position and activities to create more internal motivation, and even to move from a nice to have approach to a must have approach, meaning that academic institutions need to understand that diversity is not just a slogan. It's essential for strengthening Israel's academic system. Universities and colleges that are deeply diverse, according to all research that I've read so far, and whose diversity is part of their organizational culture, obviously are more relevant to students, to faculty, to administrative staff, if I'm going to be more poetic, than even to the entire Israeli society. Also, we're talking about moving from diversity activities to diversity thinking, And this can be achieved in two ways, moving from activities that addresses diversity at the basic or necessity, such as, which is completely important, yes, inclusive calendar, conferences to raise awareness and so on, to activities that address diversity at the more profound levels, for example, diversity in faculty, which is, as I mentioned before, as of today, are not being addressed in a satisfactory way, and moving from conversation focused solely on diversity, as it was here in Israel until now, to conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As you can hear, as you heard from Mona, we have more Arab students now in universities and colleges. That's it. Are we done? Can we go home and celebrate the great achievement? No, we have new challenges and new obstacles that we need to address. So diversity is something that we need all the time to develop and look at it as a very dynamic process. We also have recommendations about the DI officers and about how to move them to locations of power and influence, but I won't get into all of that now. I just want to say two more things. I know that it's very obvious. I find myself say it a lot, but it's not very obvious. And I feel that we need to say it over and over again, and to emphasize that for many societal groups in Israel, academia will always be, here definitely, I don't know about other places, will be the setting for initial encounters with members of social groups. I'm talking about students and faculty and administrative staff all together. For some groups, especially the Jewish ones, the cultural encounter takes place in the mandatory military service. But for certain groups, especially Arab ones, also the ultra-Orthodox ones, higher education is the first opportunity to meet people from other population groups in Israeli society. And this underlines, I think, the unparalleled importance of academia for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I just want to finish with a sentence that I heard recently, 4 months ago, vice presidents. We have a professional forum with the vice presidents and other senior staff focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we went to a conference in San Diego, the NADOHI conference, the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. And prior to the conference, we visited New York's Columbia University and also CUNY. And the meeting at CUNY was very special for me. It began with an inspiring lecture by the university president. I really cannot pronounce his name, so I'll avoid that. One of his insights that especially I feel that touched me and helped me organize the puzzle of diversity, equity, and inclusion was his statement that diversity is like democracy, a process, never a product. It's something that we need to continuously work at, that is dynamic, as I mentioned before, that is changing, and that demands our constant involvement. So that's again, if you want to hear more about the program, the challenges that we found, and we obviously encountered the same kind of challenges, including what is diversity, who are the population to go under this umbrella of diversity inclusion, what has the state defined to be inclusive populations, what do we see in reality? So all very interesting insights. I will be more than happy to share with you. We have a presentation, a long one that I will be more than happy to give Naama. And I just want to end with saying Inbar, Naama, and Ori. Ori is my professional colleague and partner and a friend, and we work together to promote this program. And so I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this special workshop, and I'll send you the materials so you can share it with anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yosefa. We'll be happy to get the materials. And it was also very inspirational and interesting to hear the different approaches and what you said about involving the many parts and staff and students of the institution. I think once you are sharing this, then the solution is much more possible and available. Do any of you have any questions for Yosefa or maybe Tom?
I just want to say that I have to go.
Okay, no problem.
Since I've been here since 9:45. And
yeah, it was a long day. So I think we'll let everyone to go to their lunches, and bon appetit. And I hope we gave you some food for thought. Thank you for joining us, being part of this day, Tom, Yosefa, Ori. It was great to have you here and to be part of this important day and subject. So see you in our next event. Inbar, can you share our all ways of contact with us, with the National Erasmus Plus office in Israel in the chat? And yes, we can.
Thank you very
Of course,
much.
we will share the information in our feedback email. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.